The rain in Cleveland fell like a sentence, heavy and unforgiving, washing away the last remnants of a life Andrew Harris had desperately tried to hold together. At 22 years old, Andrew stood on the cracked pavement outside of the dilapidated apartment complex, his entire existence shoved into a single olive green canvas duffel bag. The eviction notice taped to his former front door was already curling in the damp air. He had nothing left. No family, no friends who could afford to take him in, and as of 3 hours ago, no job at the auto repair shop that had shuttered without warning. For 18 years, Andrew had worn the label of the abandoned child like a lead weight around his neck. The story, drilled into him by his father, David, was simple and cruel. When Andrew was 4 years old, his mother, Beatrice, simply walked out the door one Tuesday morning and never came back. She hadn't wanted to be a mother. She hadn't wanted him. David had raised Andrew in a haze of bitterness and cheap whiskey until his liver finally gave out when Andrew was 10. From there, Andrew was thrust into the cold machinery of the state foster system, bouncing from one indifferent home to another. His longest stint was with Brenda Higgins, a woman whose strict rules and loveless household taught Andrew that survival meant keeping his head down and expecting nothing from anyone. But buried at the bottom of his duffel bag, wrapped in a plastic grocery sack, was the only inheritance David Harris had ever given his son. It was a small, rusted iron key and a folded, yellowed property deed bearing a set of coordinates in upstate New York. Before he died, David had tossed it onto Andrew's hospital bed, his eyes glassy and malicious. "Your mother's rotting sanctuary," David had wheezed. "She bought it before she ran away. The state mailed the deed to me when she stopped paying the taxes. If you ever want to see where that coward went, it's yours. But you'll only find ghosts." For 12 years, Andrew had ignored it. Why seek out the ghost of a woman who hadn't loved him enough to stay? But standing in the freezing Ohio rain, with $0 in his bank account and nowhere to go, the coordinates suddenly felt less like a painful memory and more like a final desperate destination. He sold his only valuable possession, a silver pocket watch he'd found at a pawn shop for $80, bought a one-way Greyhound ticket eastward, and began the journey. The coordinates pointed to a sprawling, heavily forested region in the Adirondack Mountains, miles away from the nearest paved road. The bus dropped Andrew off at a rural gas station just outside the sleepy town of Tupper Lake. From there, he had to walk. The woods were a different world. The oppressive, smog-choked air of the city was replaced by the sharp, stinging scent of pine needles, damp earth, and decaying leaves. The canopy overhead was so thick it fractured the afternoon sunlight into pale, dusty beams. Andrew hiked for hours, his boots sinking into the soft moss, the silence of the wilderness ringing in his ears. His legs ached, his stomach growled with a hollow emptiness, and doubt began to gnaw at the edges of his mind. David was right, he thought, wiping a mixture of sweat and rain from his forehead. "There's nothing out here. I'm walking to my own grave." But just as the sun began to dip below the tree line, casting long, menacing shadows across the forest floor, he saw it. Nestled against the side of a steep, rocky embankment, nearly swallowed whole by creeping ivy and overgrown rhododendrons, was a cabin. It was small, built of heavy, dark timber that had weathered to a slate gray. The roof was pitched and covered in a thick carpet of green moss. It looked less like a house and more like a natural extension of the forest itself, a secret kept faithfully by the trees for almost 2 decades. Andrew's breath hitched in his throat. He approached slowly, stepping over a rotting wooden porch step that groaned under his weight. A heavy iron padlock secured the thick oak door. With trembling hands, Andrew reached into his pocket, retrieved the rusted key, and slid it into the mechanism. It resisted at first, the internal tumbler stiff with age, but with a sharp twist, it gave way with a heavy clack. Andrew pulled the lock free, gripped the cold brass handle, and pushed the door open. He expected the stench of animal rot, a collapsed roof, or the debris of scavengers. Instead, as the dusty air rushed past him, Andrew was met with a scene that made his heart stop. The cabin was perfectly intact, frozen in a silent, heartbreaking tableau. Sunlight filtered through a single, grind-caked window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. In the center of the room sat a solid oak table with a single chair. Against the far wall was a stone fireplace, the ashes in the hearth long cold. But it was the details that shattered Andrew's composure. The walls were lined with bookshelves, crammed with classic literature, botany guides, and poetry. In the corner, a beautiful, intricately carved wooden rocking chair sat beside a small hand-woven rug. And there, resting on the rug, was a small, faded blue, stuffed elephant. Andrew walked over and picked up the toy. His thumb brushed over a patch on the elephant's ear, where the fabric had been meticulously restitched with red thread. A memory, buried beneath 18 years of trauma and survival, sparked violently in his mind. He remembered that elephant. He remembered crying when its ear tore, and he remembered soft, warm hands fixing it. His mother's hands. Tears pricked his eyes. Why was his toy here? If she had abandoned him to start a new life, why had she brought a relic of the child she threw away? Andrew turned his attention to a small writing desk near the window. It was covered in a thick layer of dust. Sitting in the center of the desk was a stack of leather-bound journals. Beside them sat an ornate, locked metal box and a framed photograph laid face down. He reached for the photograph first. Wiping the dust from the glass, he looked at the image and felt the floor drop out from beneath him. It was a picture of a woman with bright, laughing eyes and auburn hair, holding a toddler tightly to her chest. The toddler was Andrew. The woman, Beatrice, wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking down at him with an expression of such profound, unfiltered, and overwhelming love that it physically hurt Andrew to witness. "Why did you leave?" Andrew whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. "If you loved me, why did you leave?" Desperate for answers, Andrew pulled out the chair and sat at the desk. He reached for the first journal in the stack. The leather was dry and brittle. He opened to the first page. The date at the top was September 14th, 2008, exactly 3 days after the day David always claimed she had run away. The handwriting was frantic, pressed so hard into the paper that it had almost torn through. "They tell me he's gone. The police say there is no evidence, no trail. But I know. David took him. He waited until I was at work, packed a single bag, and stole my boy. He told me last week that if I ever tried to leave him, he would make sure I never saw Andrew again. I didn't believe him. God help me. I didn't believe the monster he truly was." Andrew stared at the words, his mind reeling, desperately trying to process the magnitude of a lie he had been fed his entire life. He hadn't been abandoned. He had been kidnapped. For the next 4 hours, as the cabin grew dark and the moon rose to cast a silver glow through the window, Andrew read. He read through 18 years of a mother's agony, captured in ink. He read how Beatrice had spent every waking hour and every dime she had trying to find him. How the police, swayed by David's careful manipulation and a lack of forced entry, had treated it as a simple custody dispute that they refused to intervene in. He read how Beatrice had hired private investigators, plunging herself into massive debt, tracking faint leads across the country. June 3, 2011, one entry read, "I found them. He has him in Cleveland. I parked across the street from the playground and saw my sweet Andrew. He's so tall now. It took everything in my soul not to run to him." But David's lawyer sent a message. "If I approach them, if I alert the authorities, David has a fake passport ready. He will take Andrew to South America, and I will truly lose him forever. I have to be smart. I have to wait until Andrew is older, until David drops his guard." Andrew wept. He wept for the mother who had watched him from the shadows, paralyzed by the fear of losing him permanently. For the years he spent hating a woman who was sacrificing her own sanity to keep him safe. The journals revealed that Beatrice had bought this remote cabin under a false name, using it as a safe house and a base of operations. She took odd jobs in the nearby towns, sending whatever money she could spare to a hidden trust account she was building for Andrew's future, waiting for the day he turned 18, the day David could no longer legally control him. But as Andrew reached the final journal, the handwriting changed. It lost its sharp, determined edge, becoming shaky and faint. August 12, 2016. Andrew was 12 years old at this time. David had been dead for 2 years, and Andrew was trapped in Brenda Hakins' foster home. The doctor gave me the news today. Stage 4 glioblastoma? Aggressive. Inoperable. They say I have 6 months, maybe less. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow. I waited out the monster. David is dead. But I spent so much time hiding, so much time trying to build a legal fortress to rescue my son safely, that I missed my window. Now, the state has him lost in their system, and I don't have the strength left to fight them. I am dying, and my boy still thinks I abandoned him. Andrew clutched his chest, a physical pain radiating through his ribs. She had died. She had died out here, alone, believing her son would forever hate her. He turned to the very last page of the final journal. There was a single entry, written with what must have been agonizing effort. Andrew, my beautiful boy, if you are reading this, it means you found your way to me. I instructed the lawyers to send the deed to David's last known address upon my death, knowing that one day, when you were old enough, it would fall into your hands. I am so sorry. I am so sorry I couldn't save you from him. I am so sorry I wasn't there to dry your tears, to pat your scraped knees, to watch you grow into the man I know you have become. You were never abandoned. You were the only thing that kept my heart beating. Look under the floorboards beneath the rocking chair. It is all for you. Go to Boston. Find my parents, tell them I sent you home. I love you. I have always loved you. Mom. The silence in the cabin was profound. Andrew sat completely still, the weight of his entire life shifting, settling into a new, heartbreaking, yet beautiful reality. The narrative of his worthlessness, the core belief that he was unlovable, it had all been a lie constructed by a spiteful man. Slowly Andrew stood up. His legs felt weak, but a new, unshakable strength burned in his chest. He walked over to the intricate wooden rocking chair and pushed it aside. He knelt on the woven rug and examined the wooden floorboards beneath it. One of the planks was slightly raised, lacking the iron nails that secured the others. He dug his fingers into the gap and pried the board up. Beneath it, resting in a hollowed-out space in the earth, was a heavy, fireproof lockbox. A small silver key was taped to the top of it. Andrew peeled the tape away, inserted the key, and popped the lid open. Inside, protected from the dampness of the forest by layers of plastic, lay his mother's legacy. There were thick bundles of United States savings bonds, accumulated over a decade of agonizing labor and penny pinching. There was a velvet box containing a stunning diamond wedding ring, accompanied by a note that read, "Sell this. Never let him have it." There was a thick envelope containing the official documents of a trust fund, holding a sum of money that made Andrew's head spin enough to pay for college, buy a home, and start a life he had never dared to dream of. But the most valuable item in the box was at the very bottom. It was a thick leather binder. Andrew opened it. Inside were meticulously preserved documents, his original birth certificate, his mother's birth certificate, and a detailed genealogical record. At the front was a handwritten letter with an address in the historic Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. It listed two names, Thomas and Eleanor Sterling, his grandparents, people who, according to Beatrice's notes, had never stopped looking for their daughter and the grandson who was stolen from them. Andrew looked around the cabin one last time. The shadows had deepened, but the room no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a sanctuary. It felt like an embrace. He carefully placed the journals, the lockbox, and the stuffed blue elephant into his canvas duffel bag. The bag that just a day ago held the pathetic remnants of a defeated man now carried the heavy, undeniable proof of a mother's enduring love. He stepped out of the cabin, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind him, leaving it unlocked. He didn't need to seal it away anymore. The secrets had been set free. The rain had finally stopped. As Andrew Harris began the long hike back through the dense Adirondack woods, the early morning sun crested over the horizon, casting a warm golden light through the canopy. He was no longer a homeless, abandoned orphan running from a painful past. He was a survivor heading to Boston, finally ready to go home.